What is going on, everybody? How you all doing out there? I hope this video is finding you well. Welcome back to Get Right On In. My name is Andrew, for those of you who do not know. Today I'm just going to be going over my wrap-up from December 2020. For those of you who do not know, I took place in the Shelf Space Reindeer Games Readathon. I was on Team McCallister, and we came in a very close second place. Congratulations to Team Clark Griswold. That was ran by my booktube bestie Lezlie over at the Nerdy Narrative. I suppose if there was anybody on here that I would be okay with losing to, it would have been you, Lezlie, so congratulations for taking the title this time. But regardless of the results of the readathon, I had such a great time getting to know my Team McCallister mates as well as the other participants in this little readathon. I was new to the Shelf Space Discord when I joined this, so I wanted to use this as a way to get to know more people, and I got what I wanted out of that. I myself had the best reading month I've ever had in my life. I read 14 books. I read just about 10,000 pages. It was just wild, so I'm just gonna go over what that was all like for me. So without further ado, let's get right on in. Alright, so the first book that I read for this month was called Perfume, the Story of a Murderer. I'm still trying to process this book. I would love it if more people would read this book. If I had any kind of video about books that I would want more people to read, this would definitely be on that list. One thing that I would really like to say from this book that has really stuck with me that I appreciated a lot was the conversation around the idea of scent. And here's what I mean by that, okay? So if you, whoever you are watching this, if you like change your deodorant or you change your soap in the shower or something like that, like you notice when you smell different, but then you get used to your own smell. And it's even kind of the same thing with people that you know. Like if they change their cologne or if they smell different than what you're used to, like you recognize when people have new scents. And that was a main topic in this book that I really was, I wasn't really expecting it to be what it was in that regard, but it has made me become very self-aware of how I smell and like my own odor. I don't know, like just to be aware of my own scent. And I've been thinking a lot about my dog and how dogs don't recognize you by your features but by your scents, and it's made some more sense about why my dog freaks out so much when I shower or why she hates bathing herself, because then it's a different scent for her. And I don't know, it was definitely just a trip of the mind of a book, and I didn't end up using it for any of the prompts. I had initially put it in there for the unlikable protagonist prompt, but I needed to read longer books if I wanted to have any kind of chance in this readathon, and maybe that's why we didn't win, because I started with short books and added big ones later. But Perfume was still Perfume happened. I don't know what else to say about it, but I definitely do recommend it. And if you do have Scribd and you like audiobooks, then I also recommend it just for the audiobook, because I think the narrator did a great job. The next book that I read that I also didn't end up using for any of the prompts was The Last Unicorn. Myself and Jessie over at the Bookish Mom are each going to be doing a book to movie comparison video for this book, so I'm not gonna really waste too much time talking about it here. I said it, I think, in the first wrap-up video where I finished this, that it was basically just as weird as the movie, so I'm not really sure what else to say about this book. I liked it. I think it'll be interesting to go back through it again when I do watch the movie so that I can start to make those notes and comparisons. It's also been a really long time since I've seen the movie, so I think maybe part of the problem was that I was just trying to think about the movie too much while I was reading this, and maybe that was part of the problem, because then you go into the book with all these expectations of the movie. But it's definitely not a bad book. If people have seen the movie, it's one that would be worth checking out. It's also pretty short. It's a very quick, light read. Doesn't take a long time. It's not super heavy, so I don't know, but this was a 3 out of 5 for me at the end of it all. Perfume was a 5 out of 5. I know I didn't just give that ranking a second ago, but that was a 5, this was a 3, and I still recommend reading it, but I'll talk more about it when I do my little comparison video. The next book that I read this month that I did actually get to include in on my prompts, and this went under my reread prompt, and that was for the Neverending Story. I love this book so much, I really do. I will also be doing a book to movie comparison for this one. This one's gonna be first because Jessie has not finished The Last Unicorn yet from what I understand, so I believe that I will have this book to movie comparison out within a couple of weeks. I said before, I'll say it again, that the movie is only the first half of this book. I really enjoyed the movie depiction of what it did from this book, even though there is so much more from this book that I wish would have gone into the Neverending Story too, but I will talk, I guess, more about those as well in that book to movie comparison vid. I just like to talk about this book as often as I can because I just feel like people don't really know that Neverending Story was a book first, and it was, so I just like to take any opportunity I can to let people know that it's a great book, and that if you are a fan of the movie, then you'll probably at least like the first half, but I know that the second half is kind of iffy. I don't know, I'll talk more about that when that video is out, I suppose. The next book that I read this month was for the short story slash novella prompt, and I did the Everything's Eventual short story collection by Stephen King. It features 1408, which is a movie you may or may not have seen. I did not enjoy every story from this, but I did enjoy some of them, and I especially enjoyed the audiobook of this. The second story in here that is called The Man in the Black Suit kind of freaked me out a lot, and that was one of 2 Stephen King audiobook experiences this month that is going to stick with me. So I will talk about the other one in a minute, but in the second book here, the audiobook narrator, just all I'm gonna say from it without having any spoilers is just big fish. Ooh, it just freaks me out so much. I'll just be out in the middle of the night walking my dog, and I'll just be looking around, and like I'll just hear that in my mind, just like that narrator who's just like big fish. Ooh, it was so creepy. But not every story in this book freaked me out like that, but the big fish one, it's a big fish. Okay, and next up, I believe this was for the Own Voices prompt that I used, but it was for the Poppy War that I loved so much. This book was first recommended to me by Liz over at Galactic Reads, and I've seen so many people talk about it since. I see so many up and down opinions on it, as with, I mean, every book, just let's be real about it. I loved this book from start to finish. Literally, the first sentence had me, and I was there all the way through until the end. One of my favorite things, though, is when I was watching Jashana say some stuff about this, and I won't quote too much because I'm trying to stay spoiler-free with everything that I'm talking about, but when she was talking about the pig, just everything she was saying about that was so funny. And if you have not checked out Jashana, she is just so funny, and I love her so much. But I see what she was saying about the pig. That's all I was trying to say about that. Anyone who has read this book knows at least what I'm talking about with the pig. But I very much enjoyed this book. I am super excited to get into the Dragon Republic, I believe, is book number 2. I haven't even checked with my library yet. I need to see if they have the Dragon Republic and the Burning God, because it's coming up to January now, and it's time for a new TBR, and I need to know what happened to Rin, and I need to know why people put her in the unlikable protagonist prompt, except for I can kind of already see how that's going to happen, but I'm just not there yet. So I need to be there so that I can know what is going on in the Poppy War, okay? R.F. Kuang, thank you for writing a book that I really enjoyed, because this and Perfume, I think, were my top 2 from this month, except for the Neverending Story, but that was a reread, so I don't know, I guess it doesn't really count, but yay, 5 stars for the Poppy War. Also, like 3.75 for this one. I keep forgetting to do ratings for all of them, but yeah, like 3.75 for this one. It was was good. The 1408 story too, especially if you have seen that movie, it was worth checking out. But what I felt about that story was mostly that it read to me as a short story of The Shining. So like if 1408 would have been a full book, it would have felt like The Shining. So I don't know, it was very similar in that regard, but it was definitely worth checking out. So next up, I read It by Stephen King. Alright, so first of all, you may or may not have seen my little 1,000-page reading challenge vlogs on my channel here. I do have the full version of that vlog uploaded, and then at the last minute I decided to split it into two. I don't really know how I feel about that, because then the second video went on to get like almost 600 hits and didn't have really good watch time because it seemed like a lot of people bounced as soon as I said that it was the part 2 and not the part 1. I don't know, I'm still new to this YouTube thing and I don't know how all of that works. But if you saw that vlog, you will just know that I did a 1,000-page in a day reading challenge as challenged by Abby Salter. It was a day, I'll tell you that much, and it was an experience, and I, for the rest of my life, will be hearing the narrator of that audiobook screaming in my head, and I will never stop telling people to listen to that book. So if you are into audiobooks at all, and if you like horror books, I highly recommend listening to it. There's a lot of opinions on the book itself. I've definitely noticed that there are some rambly parts in that book because Mr. Stephen King can just talk and talk and talk over some stuff that's just really not very prudent to the story. There is one particular scene at the end of the book that I'm glad that they did not put into the movie at all. It was definitely a very interesting experience, so check out those vlogs if you haven't. I'll have them linked down in the description box. They might have already popped up somewhere, whatever editor Andrew has done. But that was definitely an experience that I don't really know if I will ever be repeating because 1,000 pages in a day was just a lot. I was able to retain it. I did enjoy it for what it was, but I think something that I learned from this readathon in general was that while I can read quickly and while I can retain a lot of information and while it is fun, I don't really think it's gonna be something I'm gonna be doing very often. I think maybe like, you know, up to 8 or 9 normal sized books, not these 1,000-page tomes. I'm not even done with the 1,000-page tomes yet, but it's just too much. But It by Stephen King, it's a good book by itself. I was already a 5 out of 5 read for me because I had read it before, but 10 out of 10 for the audiobook because that narrator, honestly, if your name is Sharon and you're watching this video, then you also listened to the It audiobook over this last month and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Next up for the Crown prompt, I went ahead and read Clash of Kings. I've read this before. I have opinions on Game of Thrones in general. This book I mostly just read again to get us the pages because I really wanted us to win and we were so close. This is a good book. My thing with Game of Thrones is that I think that the first 3 books are great. I think that Feast of Crows and Dance with Dragons were not great. And I feel like my issue is that this series, I believe, was only supposed to be a trilogy in the first place. And now that it is supposed to be a 7-book series that has been stuck on the 5th book for 10 years and has had the TV show give us that ending, I just don't really know how I feel about this series anymore because I feel like the first 3 books were great and that should have been it, and I feel like he's written himself into a corner from there, and I don't really know. I don't know, I just have opinions that I don't really need to get into in this video. Next up, I finished this monstrous book here called Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. You may have heard of it, you may have not, but if you are watching any booktube video out there, you have more than likely heard of this book. I did post my spoiler-filled reaction review to it. I will link to that down in the description box as well. I'm still processing this book. There was so much that happened. It's like a 4 out of 5 for me. This ultimately went into my unlikable protagonist prompt. If you have seen my review on this, that is because I did not like Venli whatsoever. I don't want to spend too much time talking about this book in this video because I have that video, but since that video is full of spoilers, I enjoyed this book. It is not my favorite of the Stormlight archive at all. It is actually probably my least favorite thus far, but I do have a feeling that on a reread I might feel differently about it. As of right now though, I mean, it was a 4 out of 5 for me. And Johanna, if you're watching out there, I feel like you and I have talked about this, and I agree with what you said. It's just what I liked about this book, I loved, and what I didn't like about this book, I hated. So I don't really know what else to say about this. You can check out the review if you would like, but I'm happy that I read this at least because I love the Stormlight archive. I love Brando Sando, and this is the only Stormlight archive book I actually own as of right now, so I enjoyed it for that as well. Apart from that, it was the unlikable protagonist. But I enjoyed this book a lot, and if you have not read the Stormlight archive, you should, even though they're huge and they're a little bit intimidating. But Brandon Sanderson is a very readable fantasy writer, and I feel like anyone who's read him, that's kind of one thing that we agree on. That is why we recommend Brandon Sanderson to people who are trying to get into fantasy, because even though he has these huge, crazy, intimidating looking books, he has a very readable style that is very approachable and easy to understand, and that's why he's just Brandon Sanderson. Next up, I finished Wizard's First Rule. This was also a reread for me that ended up going down into my romance prompt of all things, because Richard and Kaylin is a very beautiful romance, okay? So apart from the issues that are in the Sword of Truth series, they are a very beautiful relationship, and it is very heartfelt, and there's a lot that goes on in that relationship, okay? So my booktube bestie Lezlie gifted me this book for Christmas, and since the entire series is also available on Scribd for the audiobooks, I did a beautiful immersion read with this. I loved getting back into this story. I read the entire Sword of Truth series in high school, and now that I'm reading it as an adult, I can see a lot more of the issues that people were talking about with this book and with Terry Goodkind and some of the things that he wrote. He's definitely very into physical descriptions, which just gets very tedious by the end of this. I mean, did you know that Kaylin has green eyes? Did you know that Richard has gray eyes, or that Darkenwall has blue eyes and blonde hair, and like all of these things over and over and over again? And the one thing I do remember about this series from the first time that I read it all those years ago is that Terry Goodkind just ruined the word cascade for me, because he uses it so much to describe everything, especially Kaylin's hair that cascades down over her shoulders and her back. But I love this book. Despite all of those issues, the story is great here in the Sword of Truth. And when I did initially read this back in high school, I wanted to read it alongside of the Wheel of Time series, but I was told that I would get confused. I mean, this month I was juggling books left and right, so I don't really think that that's as much of a thing anymore. And it also didn't stop me from trying it, because I also read Eye of the World, so that is the book 1 of the Wheel of Time series. Back in the day when I first started reading this, I heard a lot about this as well, and the comparison in between the two, and a lot how he as in Terry Goodkind was rude to Robert Jordan, and there was all this whatever early 90s drama going on. Now both of these authors have passed. I don't really know. It was interesting reading them side by side because I could see some of the similarities, but I saw more of the the Lord of the Rings similarities in here that are discussed, because I'm pretty sure Robert Jordan was open about, I guess this is the most Lord of the Rings inspired of the Wheel of Time books. I had read this one before. It was the only one from Wheel of Time that I have read, so I'm excited to move forward into The Great Hunt, which I started at one point and then accidentally kind of DNF'd. But I would like to finish the series because I am a big Brandon Sanderson fan, if you didn't know from a second ago. And I would like to see how he ends this series, because I hope that it's better than this one. Because this is similar to kind of how I felt about Game of Thrones, where this was, the Sword of Truth was only supposed to be 6 books, and Faith of the Fallen, the 6th book, was the last good book. So after that, it was like, okay, I get it. I'm done with your books now, Mr. Goodkind. Thank you for the series, but write something else. Although now, I guess, with all due respect, he can't. Was that, I don't know, was that rude? It's just the truth. He passed this year, so like RIP. Moving on, for my little red or green cover prompt, I read Jade City. It was okay. I mean, I was struggling with it at first. And then my team captain, Jeff, said something that made it a lot easier for me to get through this book. And he said that if you are going into this book expecting like magic and fantasy and adventure like that, it's not gonna be what you find. If you go into this book looking for a family political drama, it's exactly what you're gonna get here. So with that in mind, once I adjusted to that, because that was kind of what I was struggling with at first, I was like, I thought this was a fantasy and it feels like a political thriller, and it is. I guess it would be more of a political thriller, but I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it as much as I had hoped I would, and I don't know if I will be continuing on with Jade War. I hear that Jade War gets more political, so I don't know. We'll just have to see how that goes. In the meantime, this one was like a 3.75 for me as well. Just because, I don't know. It was okay, but it wasn't like mind-blowing, and I just was ultimately like, yeah, okay, it was okay, but yeah, okay, it was okay. Moving on, the next book I read for the self-published prompt was called Beastborne by James T. Callum. When I first started this channel a few months ago, his other book called Pyresouls Apocalypse was one of the first that I reviewed, because this book I read as an influence for my National Novel Writing Month book that's all over this channel. Beastborne was his actual first book. I found it as part of the Kindle Unlimited, and at first I was reading through it and I was like, man, you know, this is super good, but I feel super confused, and that's just because I discovered 100 pages in that I was actually reading book 2 on accident, so I will have to get around now to book 2, but I did go back to the first book to read it, and it was pretty good, to be honest. I think I liked Pyresouls Apocalypse here better, because, I mean, this one is just under 500 pages, and Beastborne was just under 1100, and honestly I just feel like that was kind of my biggest issue with Beastborne, I guess, was that I didn't think that it needed to be as long as it was. I enjoyed it for the most part, but there was definitely some places where I would have cut out some stuff to maybe not have made it so long. The second book is also 1200 pages, so I mean, I'm gonna read it at some point, but I don't think that I'm gonna like rush to read it, because I'm scared that I'm gonna find some similar issues where I don't think it needs to be 1200 pages long. And I had that a lot with Rhythm of War as well. And so for the fact that I read, I think, 4 books that broke 1,000 pages this last month, I just have that issue with the big books, where if it doesn't need to be that long, then I don't want it to be that long. And some books can be that long, like it. Well, it probably could have been like 800 or 900 pages, but regardless, Beastborne came out to be a 3.75 out of 5 for me. I did enjoy it. I do enjoy James T. Callum as an author. I just feel like I will be more likely to rush out to continue this this series, the Pyresouls Apocalypse one, than I would be to read the second Beastborne book. Even though I'm already 100 pages into that and I enjoyed what I read, so I will be continuing it, but I'm not like, let's go get right on into that right now, because it's just, I need a break. I also, for the buddy read prompt, listened to the audiobook of Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan, and I enjoyed it. I think what I feel is similar to how I felt about Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, is that with those books, since I only listened to the audio, I think it would have been better if I could have done an immersion read instead of just listening to it. Like, I had 5 chapters left of Theft of Swords before I discovered the ebook for it from my local library, so it would definitely be one that I'd be willing to go back into and reread because I enjoyed what I listened to. It's just that I've this last month discovered that me and audiobooks and reading at the same time for immersion reading is the best, and I struggle besides that. So I struggle with just listening to an audiobook, or I struggle with just reading a book, but listening and reading at the same time, just totally my, like, peanut butter and jelly. I'm so happy that that is something that I discovered that I like to do. Okay, I have 1 book left, and if you've been following me at all, then I think you already know which one I'm talking about, but it is called Immortality Awaits. And it was written by me. And I saved this for last because I'm hoping no one's still here listening to me ramble. But here's the thing, okay? I went into this book hoping that when I came out of it, I wouldn't hate it as much as I did in the past, or say that I did, or whatever. It came out, I mean, I gave it 3 stars, even though I still feel like it's like -3. It's just, my thing, I guess, is because I'm so into it that I just know what the revision currently looks like, and there was so many times that I was reading this book that I just kept hoping I was reading the revision, and that's not what I was reading. I was reading this piece of crap. So I just don't know. It was just so frustrating for me. I haven't even read the revision in like 2 years, so I did do a vlog on this. It will be coming out next week. I would like it if people would watch at least some of it. I don't really know how long it's gonna be at the moment. It'll be under an hour. That's all I can say, but I did take my opportunity in that vlog to discuss all of my issues with this, a little bit about the revision as well. If you saw my It vlog, then I think that you know kind of the setup of my vlogs. I do try to make them at least aesthetically like cool and pleasing, and I take fun shots, and I definitely had a lot of fun filming this vlog, and I'm very excited about releasing that vlog, so I would love it if people, I'd rather you watch that than read this, but I'm super excited about getting into the revision, and out of anything, I think that that's what I got the most out of reading this, was that it lit the fire that I felt like I needed to get right on in to the revisions that I've been putting off for a long time now. I have 1 revision of this entitled The Immortal King, and I have 1 revision of this entitled The Fires of Hell. So at this point, I'm basically going to read each of those and pick and choose the things that I like, and the final draft will come. So if anybody out there who is not named Kate from LoveStory would like to be a beta reader for me, let me know down in the comments, especially if you've made it this far in this video, then I mean, I'm here for it if you are. Whew! And I think that that actually does it for my little December wrap up here. The only book this month that I started and did not yet complete outside of that Beastborne one that I accidentally started was Monster by Duncan Swan. I was originally going to put this in either the self-published prompt or the horror prompt, but it just was too short for me at the end when I was trying to get all these long books in to get us all the points possible. I ended up putting it in the horror prompt and Beastborne in the self-pubbed prompt, so I will continue on with Monster probably next month, but I'll get into my January TBR when I get get there. As I said before though, I had a great time with this readathon. This was a super fun month for me. It was a great way to end out 2020. I'm down to do more of these in the future. I don't know if I'm gonna be as crazy involved. I'm definitely gonna read, but I don't think that I'm gonna be as competitive about the reading, and I think I'm gonna read more for the enjoyment the next time and not just to be a psycho. But I had a great reading month, and that's really all that matters out of all of this, and I've made some new friends, and this was really just such a fun way to end out an interesting year. So thank you, Jessie Mae. If you guys aren't following her, you totally should, especially now that she's gonna be so cute and pregnant and just all fluffy, and that's just gonna be adorable. But that is the wrap up for December 2020 and my very first ever readathon. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. Good job, Team Kevin McCallister, for taking second place. Congratulations to Lezlie and Team Clark Griswold for taking the crown at first. Cause of you, Stacy and Mariah and whatever. Worthy competitors. That is all that really matters out of it. I had a great time making this video and with this month, and thank you all for joining me and reading with me and writing with me and accepting me into this community. I look forward to the future, and I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day. See you next time.